Hello, everybody. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're going to go ahead and get started right away because it is towards the later end of the evening. We want to make sure we finish on time, but surely people will be coming in as we get started. But we have a variety of things to cover. There'll be plenty of time for people to join us before the discussion begins. We're here to talk about middle housing and the Unified Development Code Amendment. This is the second set of meetings that we've had on this topic after May. So if you joined us then, thank you. If you are joining us for the first time, we'll make sure to cover everything so that you're up to speed. There are three people primarily working on this project, myself, Dan Bursick, and Nick Martell, but we have plenty of support from others on our team who are here tonight, Cesar, Sarah, Aaron, and Ina, and many others. And so if you have any questions, we'll all be in the chat helping answer. We also have been partnering with the U of A Strockman Institute on different parts of research and brainstorming different possible approaches. So we would love it if you would introduce yourselves in the chat. Please say your name and the general area of town where you live, such as the name of your neighborhood or cross streets. And this just helps us know who we're hearing from and where in the city. And then also what interests you about middle housing and this project. Are you here for work? Are you here because you're interested in neighborhoods? Just go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat, please, and we'll continue to move along. If you've been to public meetings before, you've probably seen a list of meeting agreements like this. It's just a general reminder to please be concise and allow others to talk. This is just to make sure we hear from everybody. And then also be respectful of different viewpoints. Please stay on topic. And then know that we have factored in plenty of time for Q&A at various points through the meeting. So please save your comments and questions until then. You can enter them into the chat anytime, but we will have breaks where we want to hear from you. And then last but not least, just know that this meeting is being recorded. So like I said, there are several sections. We're going to cover a lot of background. And then we're going to be reviewing our proposed changes to the Unified Development Code, including where this new middle housing rules will apply, our proposal for where they will apply, our proposed use changes, the dimensional standards, development standards, and some administrative changes. And then we'll be wrapping up with some next steps on how to continue to get involved and what you can expect from us going forward. So let's talk about middle housing and HB 2721. You'll hear us mention this a lot. It's a Arizona House bill that was passed in a group of housing bills in 2024. And this bill requires municipalities with a population of more than 75,000, like Tucson, to adopt regulations to allow middle housing, both within a mile of the central business district on all lots zoned for single family residential use, and on at least 20% of residential lots in developments of more than 10 contiguous acres. And middle housing, when we say that in this context of the bill, we're talking about duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and detached residential development consisting of 2 to 4 units, as well as townhomes. And the real key piece of this new state law is that the municipality cannot set restrictions, permitting, or review processes for these middle housing types that are any more restrictive than those for single family dwellings within the same zone. So they have to match single family residences. And then last but not least, the bill does give us a timeline of by the end of this calendar year. If we don't meet that timeline, middle housing shall be allowed on all lots zoned for single family without any limitations. That's the language in the bill. And so City of Tucson is trying to find something that will work for us while still meeting the state requirements. So again, this is just to illustrate what I was talking about middle housing types, duplexes, 3 and 4plexes, townhomes, and then a fourth type that you see often, especially in like older areas of town, are cottage courts, which is an arrangement of several small houses along a shared cottage area. That's also considered middle housing. and would be covered in this bill if it's 4 units. So, middle housing is good for our community because it gives people choices of where they want to live. Right now in Tucson, we have a lot of single family residential, and we are growing in the amount of apartment complexes, and there's not a lot of options in between. And so, this middle housing type allows people to have more choices to meet their income needs and their generational and lifestyle needs. So there's a lot of people who are growing out of a larger house. Maybe you're an empty nester, or maybe you just need a smaller space. Middle housing fits that gap in size and income. Also, if you're a 20 something and you're moving out of your house and you want a little bit of independence, but not like a community the size of an apartment complex, middle housing is nice for that in between. Builds community by bringing neighbors closer together, supports efficient city infrastructure and transit projects. And then there's an economic component of bringing people closer to destinations that are interesting to them and making it easier for local businesses to thrive by having a populated area to support them. So, middle housing aligns with several plans at the city, including the People Community Housing Investment Plan, or PCHIP, which was adopted by Mayor and Council earlier this year, Tucson Norte Sur from last year, the Prosperity Initiative, and Plan Tucson, which is the city's general plan. The version that we have currently in effect is from 2013. And then on your ballots in November will be Prop 417 with the update to Plan Tucson. There are policies in that update that support middle housing and housing choice as well. And so, a large reason why this is a good thing for our community is the affordability of middle housing. So, it expands housing choices and makes homes more attainable and affordable in the big picture. So, a little bit of context in Tucson, we need over 35,000 new homes.
Amanda, you're muted. Something happened and you got muted.
That's okay. Can you hear me now? Do you know what's the last thing you heard?
Right after the 35,000 new housing units.
Okay. Thanks, Sarah. You're on it. I feel like I only missed one line. Um, yeah, okay. So we have a bit of a housing shortage. We need 35,000 new homes. And in 2023, only 38% of the homes that we do have are considered affordable to median income families in Tucson. And so by adding choices to that spectrum, it helps people who are currently priced out of housing stock. And by giving those options at various price points, then it helps reduce the competition for lower cost, affordable housing units. And then the reason that these are cheaper to rent or purchase is that they are cheaper to build. The land, you need less land and the construction costs are lower. This is illustrating some of those same points about how housing in different formats meets different needs. The condos and townhomes and small detached single units are most similar to middle housing, and those meet the needs of first-time home buyers, young professionals, older adults who are downsizing, as well as small families or newly single parents. As far as affordability goes, we're looking at AMI stands for average median income, which is a standardized statistic for our community. In Tucson, for a two-person household, we're looking at a household that ranges from earning 60K to about 115K annually. So that's for a two-person household, maybe two adults, maybe one adult and one dependent. And then comparing that to a large single family home, which we do see a lot of in Tucson, where the average two-person income is 150K. So these are quite more affordable than your average large single family residential. And this is just illustrating again that housing need that we were talking about of 35,000 more homes. And the two peaks that you see on the chart are both the lower end of income, the less than the 0 to 30% AMI and the 30 to 60% AMI. That's a really important need. And Planning and Development Services, as well as our friends over at Housing Community Development Department, have a variety of projects that are working to help support meeting this need. The peak over on the right side of all blue is people who make 120% of AMI, which I believe is 80K or more for a two-person household. So that's an important need as well, and middle housing is more oriented toward that side of the chart. So back to HB 2721 and why we're here. So I mentioned kind of an overview of the requirements. There are a few more details I want to convey. I talked about the first one about within a downtown area, middle and single family housing must follow the same procedures and standards as single family residential. This affects commercial standards, which used to start at 3 or more units, are now 5 or more. The height and the parking, those requirements outlined in HB 2721 already match our current code, so there's no changes there, but they do require that we allow 2 stories and have 1 off-street or on-site parking spot per unit, which means 1 for a single family, 2 for a duplex, 3 for a triplex, and so on. In the bill, there are some definitions of household and other terms that we need to adjust to. We need to make some changes to our building code alignment, and then there's that piece at the end about developments that are 10 acres or more. So we need to adjust some of our administrative processes for larger developments. So under the requirements of HB 2721, what are we really looking at as far as change? The biggest change is in R1, but the key to know is that duplexes are already allowed almost anywhere in the city as long as you have a lot large enough to support it. And the change that we're going to be seeing is that it's now allowed on all of the lots that single family residential is allowed on, as well as triplexes and fourplexes. R2 and R3, and then commercial and office zones are not really going to be changing that much under HB 2721. But then when you add to that we already allow ADUs, which are like up to 1,000 square feet or a proportion of your main house, you're already looking at about 3 units on a site if you had a duplex and 1 ADU, and now that will go up to 4. So I'm going to pause and talk about some of the outreach that we've done so far on this issue. We started with going to mayor and council explaining the requirements of HB 2721, and we brought them some options. They reviewed the requirements and the options that we brought to them, and they directed us to get additional public input. So we had a series of meetings in May to hear from the community. We heard from a lot of people, over 360 individuals, 500 comments. There was a nice range of participants, but 2/3 of them were residents. 1/3 was there in some professional capacity. 15% were there from like a professional industry that aligns with housing. And then others were there in some other professional capacity, maybe media or other government staff. And so there was a general sentiment to apply these standards to the largest area possible, and we'll talk more about this in a second. And there was a general preference to have added flexibility to our code to make it easier to build. And then lastly, we wanted to make sure that we were addressing desert landscaping and pedestrian circulation on site. So we'll talk more about all of that. And we brought that feedback back to mayor and council, who directed us to start working on a draft proposal, which we worked on over the summer and posted last week and emailed out. And then we started having our public meetings this week to collect additional public feedback now that we have a draft. So what's in this draft? Let's talk about it. To give an overview, and then we'll dive into detail. In the draft proposed amendment, we propose a middle housing area, and within that area, middle housing is added as a new use with 5-foot setbacks, minimum lot sizes reduced by about 1,000 square feet depending on the zone, 1 parking spot per unit with an option to waive parking, and we're adding privacy mitigation requirements. Um, Commercial requirements in the building code start at 5 units, like I mentioned before. We're adding landscaping code to apply to new infill of 1 to 4 units. And then that large subdivision piece that I mentioned, if you are larger than 10 acres, 10 contiguous acres, 20% of the residential lots must allow for middle housing. And this slide indicates which changes will apply just within the middle housing area, which we'll talk about in a second. And the others are going to be proposed to start citywide starting in January. So those changes to the commercial building code, the new landscaping code, and then the large subdivision pieces are citywide. And then within the middle housing area is where middle housing is added as a use. Middle housing doesn't go away from the zones outside of this middle housing area. They'll just be using the code as it's currently written. So let's talk about that middle housing area that I've mentioned. We're going to look at some maps. So on this map, I want to show you a variety of data that the staff used when we were working up some options, which we then got community feedback on. So shown here in blue is our current proposed middle housing area. So that's our current end result, so to speak. And then the red line is the absolute bare minimum that we could do if we were following state requirements. The state bill was written a little bit open to interpretation. So we had 3 other options in dotted lines shown in green, pink, and dark blue, purple here. So that bare minimum, all of these were a little bit problematic because they split parcels in half. They don't match anything about our city with the zoning, street network, neighborhoods. And so we knew that we needed additional options. Shown here is the location of historic zones, neighborhood preservation zones, and historic districts in context with the minimum areas. And I want to just point out and also be sensitive to that a lot of these areas would be included in this bill regardless because of the minimum state requirements. We also looked at the location of middle housing where it currently exists today. And as you can see, it's very widespread throughout many parts of the city, including farther west, east, and south. We wanted to make sure we were following the street network as well as being respectful to neighborhoods and not splitting neighborhoods in half. And then we also looked at equity. There was a large concern in our conversations in May about what this would do to certain neighborhoods, especially if the area that we chose was quite small. It would concentrate a lot of the development pressure into a small area that has already experienced a lot of development pressure and displacement. And so there was a concern to be a larger area to try to spread that out. Also, to spread out the benefits of middle housing and those income choices and lifestyle choices as well. And so this map looks at some data on equity from the City of Tucson's Office of Equity and shows that the areas in blue are for a variety of social and like economic and other reasons, more vulnerable to displacement. And we wanted to make sure we were balancing that as best we could. And so from that, we had a range of options, which we brought to the public in May. And their reaction to those was to spread it out as large as possible, like I mentioned a moment ago. The dark green, orange column there are the first chart are the votes of all of our options. The dark orange one is clearly the most popular, and that happens to be the largest option that we provided as a potential minimum. And then we asked a second question of how far out would you like us to go? And you can see there's a very strong preference, in May at least, to go citywide. So using that feedback, you see here that the largest choice that we provided in May. We want to balance the concerns about being too small and the preferences for being citywide with the recognition of the state does have that required timeline. And if we don't meet that timeline, it'll be applied citywide without any limitations. So we need to have something that's feasible in order to achieve within that timeline constraint. And then here's just showing one more time what those minimum options were. The largest one here is a 1 mile buffer from our city's central business district. And that's about equal in size as the blue one. I wanted to go over what these boundaries are. Let me see if I can go back to a cleaner. This is Country Club to the east, and then it kind of zigs and zags. This is Grant and Mountain and Fort Lowell, and it goes up to Wetmore and cuts west. And then this is just following our city boundary over to I-10. It comes back over and then follows Silver Lake. And then this is a combination of keeping neighborhoods intact, following the minimum boundary lines down to Silver Bell. And then this up and over is just following South Tucson's jurisdictional boundary and then coming back over to meet Country Club. So I know I covered a lot. We want to take a break and hear from you. We would like to use Mentimeter like we did in May. Mentimeter is an app. It's actually not an app, it's just a website. You go to menti.com and you enter in those 8 digits, or you can use your camera to scan the QR code. And that'll allow you to answer some of our questions without having to unmute yourself and speak aloud. And it shows everybody's feedback all at once. If you would not prefer to use Mentimeter, that's totally okay. You can use the Zoom chat. You can also, do the old-fashioned thing and unmute yourself and raise your hand. So we're going to take a moment here to let some comments about the geography come through. And then also, if you have any questions, please.
Amanda, do you mind putting the map up real quickly?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I had to navigate away from my PowerPoint for a second.
Actually, actually, real quickly, do you mind going right to the QR code? I'm going to screenshot it and put it into the chat, and then we'll go right back to the map.
Sure.
Okay, go right ahead. I got it.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to go back to the Q&A and to see if we're getting any feedback. All right, a couple votes for going citywide, a couple votes for pulling back. Why not go citywide now? Just like I mentioned, we want to be respectful of all of the complexity that we see citywide. This is already a fairly complex area of town in terms of the different types of the mix of housing zones and lot sizes and different things. And so that complexity only adds if you go citywide. To go citywide right away, we might not meet that time limit given by the state. And so we just want to be respectful and prudent of everything that we need to do in order to be as comprehensive with our work as possible. But we are going to be continuing to look into citywide over time. Once we meet the requirements of the state, depending on what mayor and council ultimately adopt, additional steps after that, we'll be exploring citywide options if that's still the continued wish of mayor and council and the community.
One question from the chat, kind of along the same lines, but a bit more specific, is why stop at Country Club and not further east?
Yeah. Sorry, I had to pause because I always forget which way is east and west. Yeah, we looked at that, and it was kind of a combination of wanting to be not too far beyond the minimums that were provided to us by the state, and then just balancing a variety of other things like we showed about the location of middle housing currently, the zones, the street networks, et cetera. Oops. You'll still be able to continue to give feedback, but I do want to move to a voting slide. this is just to get us kind of a pulse of the room. Let me see, is that going? Great. Whether you feel like, in terms of the map, did we get it just right? Is it too big, too small? Are you not sure?
Those are a lot of questions. You want to go one by one? How can you vote on all of those?
Are you referring to questions in the chat or in the comment screen that we just had up?
Well, I thought you were asking us to vote on something here.
Oh, yeah. If you're able to weigh in on what your perspective is on the middle housing area. Do you feel like we got it just right? Are we too big or too small?
Well, why don't you
Please feel
ask
free to
that
weigh in.
question at a time and then let people vote? Are we too big or too small is one question. Did we get it just right? It's another question. So how do we vote on each one of those questions?
I think just pick which one meets, your opinion the most. How are we doing in the chat? Are we kind of slowing down?
Hey, some people are having some trouble with Menti. If you can't put a vote onto the Menti, then you can just leave it in the chat. That will be recorded, and we'll catch it there.
Thank you, Cesar. Okay, we'll keep going. Nick, I think I was able to give you control of the slides. Yeah. Okay. So whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Yes, you were. Thanks, Amanda. Good evening, everybody. Let me see if this works, actually, before I... Okay, it's just a delay, unless you all can see that okay. So yeah, my name is Nick Martel. I'm also in Planning and Development Services, assisting with working on middle housing. So I want to cover a couple things pretty broadly, and then we'll get a little bit more granular and get into some of the details. And some of the questions that you all have in the chat will be answered as we go along. So I'll get into a little bit more of some of the dimensional things. I'll talk about where middle housing is allowed, and then what kind of standards are going to be required to build middle housing if you choose to build middle housing. And then a quick preview, just in case you had some questions right now. Some of the things I will be covering are where middle housing can be built. Residential density will allow up to 4 units on conforming lot sizes. I'll talk a little bit more about that. There's a minimum lot size within established geography that we're looking to change. So these are lots within that area right now. So we're looking to change some of the lot sizes like the R1 to 6,000, where it used to be 7,000. R2, O2 to 4,000, R3 to O3 to 3,000, and I'll talk more on that. Some changes to setbacks for middle housing in terms of something on the side or on the rear yard, which would be a 5-foot setback as opposed to 6 usually. The 1 parking space required per unit, which is not actually different from what our code has right now. And then changes to some of the group dwelling definitions in certain zones. The definition is not going to change, but we are going to have to change one part of one aspect of the code, which will be pretty minor. And then some of the required landscape Amanda will get into, and then where we need to allow for middle housing in larger subdivisions per the state bill. So the map's popping back up again. So this is the map that Amanda was explaining to us. So the first question that we needed to answer was where? Where will middle housing be allowed right now? We've seen kind of a desire from mayor and council and from a lot of the community members that we've spoken to so far in our several meetings that there is a desire to go a little bit bigger than this. This is something that we'll continue to explore. But right now, our proposal is to adopt this and go forward from there, just kind of complying with the state right now. The other thing is to add a new land use called middle housing. Right now, if you're building housing in the city, it's either a single family residential or duplex, or it's a multifamily project. And so we kind of had to make something that fits in between those, which is middle housing, or a building or buildings with 2 to 4 dwelling units on site, including townhomes, and excluding accessory dwelling units. So I want to talk a little bit about where middle housing is allowed and some of the specific standards that need to be adhered to in order to build middle housing. So middle housing can be added to only zones where single family homes are currently allowed within the middle housing area. So if we go back to this map, it has to be within that area. And usually those are the non-industrial zones in the city. Most zones allow for housing to be built. So per the state bill, we have to allow housing to be built in some of those other zones like C1, C2, and that stands for commercial 1, commercial 2, and some of the office zones. Some of the other things that we're going to propose are that privacy mitigation is required when a multi-story middle housing project is within 10 feet of a property line and adjacent to existing single-family residences. So a little bit more privacy for neighbors that already have existing residencies in their on their lots. And then some more of those standards when it comes to privacy mitigation would be the prohibition of balconies, windows, except for clerestory windows or translucent windows, or really anything on the upper floor that kind of overlooks into an adjacent residence, like a large deck or something. And then parking is going to be required at a rate of 1 space per house. Parking may be waived if you're within a certain radius of a transit stop or an enhanced bike route. Very similar to how ADUs are done. And this isn't a change really from our 1 to 4 unit housing right now. If you're building 1 to 4 units in the city of Tucson already, you're more than likely adhering to that parking calculation unless you're in the R1 zone. But because of state standards, we do need to change this for all zones that allow for single family homes. The state bill does not allow us to require more than 1 per house. Okay, we'll take another quick break. Same deal. You can use the Menti website, and you can give us some answers to the questions. You can still use the chat. Feel free to raise your hand or just speak if you have any questions, and we're happy to answer them for you. Oops, sorry. Okay, it's back in the chat. Cool. While we're waiting for that, were there any questions that were left unanswered while I was speaking?
Yeah, can you address the question I posted in the chat about solar easements? Thank you.
Well, let me see if I can find it real quick.
Yeah, the question was residents concerned regarding preserving solar easements for those of us who have made a major financial investment in rooftop solar. How does the state bill address it? Dan was able to answer and said it will still be required to meet solar access requirements of the code, so it shouldn't be an issue.
So what that would mean then would be that if somebody was building a 2-story next to someone with solar and it was going to shade them during the hours of 9 to 3, that they would not be allowed to build 2 stories?
So there is a provision in the zoning code right now that says you cannot negatively affect the solar capacity of somebody that you're building next to. So, and this was kind of brought up also in our community corridors tool. So that is within our zoning code, and so you would not be able to block somebody's solar panels. All right, we have a few things coming in right now while you all are working on that. Let's see. So we have a should be as flexible as possible. Seems to me you have been thorough and respectful to those participating in the process and in keeping with the state requirements to get this done by the end of the year. And then I like the privacy constraint for the upper floor. Yeah, that's something we've definitely heard.
Another question in the chat. I'm curious to hear folks examining what other cities are doing with middle standards, letting go of letting go of ADU uniquely and thinking about A, B, C, D units.
And thanks, Meredith. So you're curious to hear folks examining what other cities are doing. Correct. We are looking at a lot of what other cities are doing. So several cities have adopted this and have kind of been ahead of us in this. And there are some cities that have adopted middle housing with similar standards. I lost the question here. And so we can share some of that information too. I think we've been working pretty closely with the Druckmann Institute to do that research, but we are definitely monitoring how other cities have done it. And we're also continuing to meet with other cities within the state that are also working on this right now. And then the second part of your question was letting go of ADU uniquely and thinking about A, B, C, and D. So I think, is that question getting at will we still be allowing accessory dwelling units within the city of Tucson? And how those kind of go and mesh with middle housing?
Yeah, I think I'm seeing more indication that it's the ADU structure itself becomes less useful in the middle housing framework. It's like if you can have in R1 up to 4 units, the split is odd, but the ADU is just one strategy for those, additional 3 units. I don't know whether that's come up, but it just seems like people are letting go of it as a more complicating layer.
Right, and that's a great observation because this is a little bit so ADU already does allow for multiple units to be built on a lot with some of these standards. And so we've been kind of talking about that internally about how we're going to address it. And I think what we've come up with is that ADUs are still allowed, but they're still going to be a little bit limited depending on how many units you have on your lot. So you are able to still do ADUs, but you could also do middle housing. But you're correct. It does seem like a little bit of a conflict because we wrote the ADUs for our code, and then the state wrote this, and there's kind of an intersection between the two. So you're totally correct. See, we have a couple other things. Should be more flexibility. This kind of meaningful zoning reform is the only answer to the housing crisis. If there are clear story windows, how does that fit into fire code? Regarding fire code, all fire codes still need to be are still going to be reviewed in the same exact way. So we're not changing anything with regard to fire code or the building code. We are making a couple changes to the threshold for using the building code, but we're changing nothing in terms of fire code. Okay, it seems like it's tapered off. Oh, sorry, somebody was about to speak.
I was going to suggest that we try doing a Zoom poll instead of Mentimeter for our next question, since everybody will be able to use it. So I'm going to go ahead and launch it. Is that okay with you guys?
Yeah, go for it. Yep.
All right. So you should all see on whatever screen you're using for Zoom a poll pop up that hopefully will be easier for everybody to use instead of Menti. We'll just give some people some time to answer this one.
And then I'm just seeing Jesse's question right here. I propose to increase density, but not middle housing per se. Could the city consider? Lost it. Could the city consider reducing minimum lot size for a lot split to build additional single family units? I apologize if not relevant. It's totally relevant, and we're actually about to talk about that here pretty soon. The answer is yes, we are proposing some smaller middle lot sizes here, and I'll get into a few more details.
All right, it looks like the there's still a few more votes coming in on the uses poll, so we'll just give it another 30 seconds or so.
Cool.
we're already at more participants here, so I think this is a good way to go. We can still use the Menti for the Q&A for people who are comfortable with it. If you're not enjoying Menti, don't feel pressured to use it. Use the chat, speak to us. We are humans here on the other side of the screen, and we do want to hear from you. Whatever means works best for you is what we would like you to use. So we'll go
Great.
ahead and stop the poll and just share the results for people to see. So we're seeing a pretty good spread, slight preference for getting it just right. Some people want to see more flexibility, and then there's a good portion that's either not sure or feels that we need to be more restrictive, less flexibility. So thank you so much for weighing in. We really appreciate your feedback.
Yep. Thank you, Amanda. So moving on, and we'll continue answering questions, and we'll have more opportunities for you all to answer questions or to ask questions. So I just want to talk little bit about some of the added flexibility that we're referring to. And this is going back to our first round of engagement back earlier this year. We asked the community how, in terms of how much you want to add some flexibility. The majority really preferred some additional flexibility in that first round. And so it kind of on par with what we're seeing right now. And then some desire to move quickly due to the urgent housing needs and development turnaround time, and then some support for a phased approach to allow for adaptive management. So something Amanda touched on a little bit. We're looking at that area that we've proposed right now. We are looking to see, once we adopt this, what we can learn from it to keep adapting, and then to keep looking at how we can improve it. So what we saw was pretty overwhelmingly that people wanted to add flexibility by adjusting setbacks, lot size, and lot coverage. And I'll get into each one of those three and what we're proposing here. The first thing that we're proposing is, and this is to the questions that were in the chat already about dimensional standard changes for lot size. So what we're looking at is doing a small reduction in minimum lot size. So staff have worked with the Drachman Institute at the University of Arizona to analyze how changes to dimensional standards can affect potential development of middle housing. If you look at this one on the left, the graphic on the left, this is kind of the typical lot right now in the city of Tucson. If you have an R1 lot, it's a minimum lot size of 7,000 square feet, meaning that you can only build a house there if you have 7,000 square feet as a threshold to actually build. In the R2, it's 5,000 square feet. We found that this is a bit of a barrier when it comes to allowing for people to build a little bit extra housing or to build housing at all. Some people end up having non-conforming lots that don't meet that current lot size and that they can't build on. What we're looking to do is to make small changes to the minimum lot size. If you look at the right graphic, I guess on your right hand of the screen, we're proposing to reduce the minimum lot size by 1,000 square feet on most of these zones. So the R2, the R3, the O2, the O3, we are proposing a slight reduction to 4,000 square feet per lot, which enables you, if you have an 8,000 square foot lot, to split it, and then you would have the ability to do housing on both lots. So this is something you would not have been able to do if you didn't have a conforming lot size previously. So we're trying to make it a little bit more flexible for more people to build more housing on their property. Some of those other barriers that we've seen that when it comes to building more housing on lots is kind of stringent setback standards. So setback is the distance between a structure and the property line. A lot of the times in the city, you'll have a standard setback and then you'll have a variable setback. So depending on how large your structure is, your setback might be even greater. So we were proposing to reduce the typical setback from 6 feet to a flat 5 feet, removing some of that variability, except for in those privacy mitigation standards, which I already went over. And this could actually help us mitigate some of the need to demolish buildings. This was a concern that's been brought up a couple times in our meetings. People are asking, do you expect a lot of buildings to be demolished so that you can just raise the land and then build a fourplex? We're trying to make it a little bit more flexible so people don't have to do that, so they can fit lots on their existing site with an existing structure on it already. With regard to density and minimum lot size, you are we have to allow for development of duplex, triplex, fourplex townhomes on all lots where single family homes are allowed. Based on some mayor and council guidance that staff have received, and the first round of public feedback that we got from you all and other people in the community, there is a desire for the city to provide more flexibility with middle housing. So we're proposing a couple changes. That reduction in minimum lot size, like I said earlier, for about 1,000 square feet in each one. So the R1 would be from 7,000 to 6,000. And then some increased density. We're proposing that you are able to build middle housing up to 4 units on those parcels that meet that new minimum lot size. So for example, if you have a 4,000 square foot R2 lot right now in the city, you would not be able to build on that. You wouldn't be able to build a single unit on that unless you had some sort of platted area that was built for that. But the state is requiring us to allow for those 4 units. And then we could reduce some of these lot sizes to allow for a little bit more building. I want to talk about a little on how we can also achieve middle housing in terms of how many housing options we have. A lot of people think of middle housing and they think, okay, it's a fourplex, so a place you can live and then 3 rentals. While that is the case, you can build rental houses on your property. We also wanted to allow for more flexibility when it comes to different housing types. So if you look on the left part of the screen, this graphic, in an R2 zone, typically you could do middle housing and you could build 4 units on a conforming lot size. So you can kind of see here that there are no lot lines in between here. This is just your typical fourplex in a neighborhood that used to allow for 4 buildings to be built. There's also the option of matching minimum lot size and density, which I'll talk about in just a second, and allowing for more splitting of parcels so that you can have smaller lot sizes and fit the same number of houses that you would have fit if you had a fourplex. So you could do a fourplex all in one lot, or you could do 4 units, same size, same area on a lot where you've subdivided it. It gives you the option to sell it or do whatever you wish with it. It provides another housing option that we don't have a lot of in the city of Tucson, outside of some of the really central areas. So what I mean by adopting an approach that combines the two, we really have 3 big options here. So 1, we could reduce the minimum lot size and leave it alone. So just reduce by 1,000 on a lot of those lots. 2, we could make the minimum lot size match the density. And what I mean by that is kind of back to this picture right here, is if you could do 4 units on one lot, allow 4 units on another lot, or allow 4 units on their own individual lot. So if this was a 5,000 square foot lot over here with 4 units on it, you could do 2 lots with 2 units that 2 lots each 2,500 square feet, where you could put 2 lots on or 2 houses on it, or you could do 4 lots that are 1,250 that you could put 1 house on it on each lot. So it's a lot. And I've said lot a lot now too. So, and then the other would be to decrease minimum lot size and allow for that matching, where you have those more opportunities to do multifamily and you have those opportunities to do smaller single family lots. When we did some analysis on this, we actually found some surprising, we kind of discovered some surprising things here. When we're talking about reducing minimum lot sizes, even pretty minimally by 1,000 square feet, that results in nearly 2,000 additional lots in the R1, the R2, and the R3 that would potentially become buildable. So those are lots that are not buildable right now because they don't conform to minimum lot size. And so they're considered non-conforming statuses, which means that they're below the minimum lot size, would not be able to expand. We also found that almost 2,500 additional lots in the R1, the R2, R3, this isn't even all the zones in the city, this is just the residentially zoned, would potentially be able to split their lots and have 2 times the minimum lot size that they theoretically would have. So they could subdivide it to sell new homes. So let's say somebody has an 8,000 square foot lot right now, and the minimum lot size is 5,000 square feet. they would not be able to split that lot right now because they would have two non-conforming lot sizes, two 4,000 square foot lot sizes. Now, if we reduce that number, then they can now have two conforming lot sizes and be able to build housing on them. So it really opens up a lot more opportunities. And this is kind of what the middle housing is aiming to do, is provide more flexibility, more opportunities for building homes for people that own lots in neighborhoods. Okay, that was a lot. I'm happy to go over any of that again or answer any questions, but please feel free to jump onto the Mentimeter. Feel free to continue asking questions, and then we will also jump into another poll. I believe there's another poll for this one, correct, Amanda? Okay. So just some preliminary things rolling in about dimensional standards, looking like it's a little too restrictive, could use some more flexibility. We'll continue monitoring that. Feel free to keep adding to the Mentimeter, and we'll record all your thoughts here. In the meantime, are there any for staff? Are there any questions in the chat that haven't been addressed yet?
Lots are getting answered, and there's a good bit of back and forth discussion happening. But one
Right.
question I'm seeing that doesn't have an answer yet is, or a comment, I guess, cost of subdividing is going to be prohibitive for many at this scale, legal services, et cetera, et cetera. Good in the abstract, but not in practice.
Yeah, and thanks for that comment. That is important to note that we're not actually changing any requirements for subdividing or land splitting. That's set by the state mostly. We don't have a lot of flexibility with that, but that is a good point that some of those things end up being cost prohibitive.
Meredith, related to that, I mean, that's kind of what we're trying to get at, and it's true. Like, subdividing is definitely a cost, and those are set at the state. What we're trying to do here, I think, is because of condo liability laws, if we didn't allow for those smaller lots or a potential lot split or something of that sort, that makes it even more challenging. So we're trying to remove some of those barriers, but obviously there's ones at the state that make it a little more challenging, even beyond that.
Yeah, I guess if I could ask a clarifying question, like the numbers, like 3,000 additional units is great, but it's really not an end game for what we're looking for density over time. So the second level of that question is, I think I'm missing something. Let's say an ownership is, I think, something we should definitely be driving for. So let's say you have space on a middle housing lot, and you want to create townhouses that are attached and be able to split them and sell them. Is there any way to do that without doing a subdivision with your strategy? The
No.
setbacks would say no, right? So you must, if you want to create that kind of density, you have to do a subdivision and you have to make that investment.
Correct. You would have to do a subdivision still. However, most of these zones already have some subdivision standards that allow you to reduce the minimum lot size. It's called the single family attached land use. So you could build them now, attach them, and they would be considered townhomes in that sense. You're correct. It would still require a subdivision to accomplish.
Yeah, so Meredith, it comes down to that whole idea of you can only, and Nick, maybe you know this better than I, but you can only split a lot, I think, what, 3 times, or maybe it's twice?
It's 3 times if you've never been subdivided before.
And so even if that lot had never been split before, you still would have a challenge with like the 4 units on that. So it's something at the state law. It was put in place to protect against wildcat developments a long time ago. So I think it's something that, not that they listen to Tucson that much at the state level, but it's definitely something that we'd love to see, and we'd love to see changed. I think it does make things challenging when you start looking at smaller scale development.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Meredith. It's an important aspect to bring up. On that same note, Joe, a minor subdivision is allowed to get those smaller lot sizes. That's correct. And depending on your application, it could be a block plat, it could be a minor subdivision. Maybe you're lucky enough that it's never been subdivided before. And Joe, I know you've looked at the process before, but yeah, so that is definitely allowed. Okay, it kind of seems like we are tailing off here. Have you closed the poll, Amanda? Okay, great. So it looks like 40% say a little too restrictive, needs some flexibility. 24% say just right, not restrictive enough is 20%, not sure 16%. So really good mix of answers. Appreciate everybody's attention to these questions because these are important for us to record and kind of keep working on these red lines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then there's the second question as well about which of the three options is preferred, and about 50% of people who voted prefer the combo. Oh, thank you. Are we ready to move on to landscaping? Okay, so when we were working with the community in May, we asked some open-ended questions about what other things do we need to be considering. And you can see here on the screen the results of that feedback. And there was a strong preference that we look at landscaping standards, as well as driveways and sidewalks and what we call like accessibility on site. Many other things were also important to the community. We haven't gotten direction to work on those yet, but they could be part of the conversation in later phases. So first we'll talk about landscaping. Just a reminder of what the purpose of landscaping is. Definitely there are some environmental purposes, including habitat, conservation of energy, heat island effect. There are some misconceptions about an empty lot, if there's no vegetation, produces more heat island effect than a building, especially a building plus landscape, especially if it has a cool roof, a white roof. The other bonuses of landscaping and the purposes of our landscaping code is to retain neighborhood character and also provide some buffering between people, and then contribute to the economic welfare of the community by just having good design and a pleasant place for people to live. And why are we introducing new landscaping standards? This is going back to that change that I mentioned at the beginning of commercial landscaping standards are in place previously for 3 to 5 units. And with the new HB 2721, because that commercial standard is now moving up to 5, and we don't currently have anything for single family residential, that means that up to a 4-plex wouldn't have any landscaping standards unless we introduce something that applies to all new single family homes up to 4-plexes. And so that's what Mayor and Council directed us to do after hearing community feedback. We do have some preliminary results about what do these added design requirements do to the cost of development. I know this is an important conversation to have. We partnered with Turner Labs out of UC Berkeley and ASU Morrison Policy Institute, Morrison Institute for Public Policy, excuse me. Turner Labs created a pro forma model for every parcel in Tucson, and that is used to test some building policy scenarios. So you can go in and play with what happens if we change the setbacks, how much potential development is there, what pencils out, as they say. And you can test different economic scenarios as well, including adding costs, like for landscaping. And what they found is that the added flexibility that Nick has discussed balances out to a very high degree any kind of additional costs of landscaping. And these are preliminary results that we want to stress, but it was very comforting to us that these neutral policy groups ran this scenario for us, and that was their preliminary result. So, oops, skipped a slide. So this is just a high-level summary of what's being proposed. Details are provided online. We are providing or proposing one new tree for every 1,000 square feet of gross floor area in the project. So if you're building a 1,000 square foot home, that's one tree. But if you're building a 1,500 square foot, that's now two trees, and so on and so forth. And then existing trees count towards this requirement. We want to make sure that we're preserving the existing tree canopy in Tucson, as long as those trees are not going to be obstructed by any proposed buildings or current buildings. And then root protection will be needed to be used during construction to make sure that those trees stay healthy. We're not only requiring trees, we're also requiring additional ground cover in the front yard. And I'll talk about that more in just a second. Placement of the trees, 50% of those have to be in the front yard in order to shade pedestrian walkways. If your site constraints prevent you from doing that, you can place them elsewhere in the site, but you still need to include at least 3 shrubs in the front. And then if you are not able to fit any trees on your site, then you can substitute 5 shrubs for each of the tree requirements. There are setbacks outlined in the code about setbacks from right-of-ways, consistent with the Department of Transportation Mobility's policies, as well as setbacks from structures and any sidewalks and curbs. We do allow you to use root protection, or I'm sorry, not root protection, a root barrier, if you would like to. And then we are going to be requiring a 6-inch depressed planting area for all of our new trees. And we provide options for irrigation or other watering methods. You can use irrigation if you want to. You could also propose some other alternative method. As long as it's approved by our staff landscape architect, it'll be okay. So that could be water harvesting, it could be gray water, it could be hand watering. And then last but not least, plants must be selected from ADWR's native plant list. So we'll talk a little bit more about the ground cover. The amount of ground cover required depends on your street frontage of your lot. Basically, if you take the street frontage minus your driveway, and if you have a pedestrian sidewalk, and then you take a 10-foot buffer, and then split that in half, that becomes the amount of square footage of ground cover that we're looking for in the front yard. It could be placed along the right-of-way, or it could be placed elsewhere in site, as shown on the diagrams, to be a more organic feel, or could be gardens. It's up to the designer's choice. There are some exceptions. And so just as a reminder, I said this at the very beginning of the presentation, that this new landscaping code will be applying to 1 to 4 units citywide, but it doesn't apply to existing dwellings or expansions of existing dwellings, and it does not apply to ADUs. Projects with 5 or more would still be using the commercial standards, and then projects that are built through subdivisions or through flexible lot development would be following those same standards as before as well. We're not changing the commercial standards, the subdivision, or the flexible lot development processes. So I'll pause there. Would love to hear your thoughts about our landscaping code. And I'll launch the poll. Oh, I have to stop sharing. Okay, there you go. Oh, where did they go? Great. So a couple of comments coming in. Flag lots pose a unique challenge in that the frontage may only be wide enough to accommodate vehicular access. How would the 50% ground cover requirement be applied to a flag lot with narrow frontage? That is a great question and a very specific circumstance. I don't believe Chad is on the line of how they consider that when it's a commercial development. Dan, Nick, do you have any thoughts on how to answer that one?
I'm sorry, I was reading the chat, Amanda. Which question was that?
Yeah, no problem. It came through Mentimeter. If
Oh,
somebody
okay.
is doing a flag lot development and they have a very narrow frontage of only large enough for your driveway, how would this landscaping requirement be applied to them?
And I'd have to read the code again. That's a really good question because this is something we see a lot. So I do think a lot of times when you see that in commercial type developments or subdivisions, they can put landscape in other places throughout the yard. And I think that would kind of be the idea here too, is that would be one of those circumstances. I think that we would have the landscape just be somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, particularly the trees. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, some comments about how this will increase water consumption um, by reducing the number of high water use plants and such like that. A lot of plants only need watering to get established. And we have worked with Tucson Water on this process, and they were enthusiastic about allowing for different types of watering processes. And so we've integrated that in. Um, if we allow hand watering, the plants will die. Um, Maintenance of the plants will become a code enforcement conversation. I love landscaping and the impact it would have, but this feels overly prescriptive for R1. Enforcement would be a useless and consistent way. Tucson today, generally okay for owner properties. Thank you for your feedback. Vegetation primers that don't prioritize water conservation. Can we eliminate the irrigation requirement for front yards? The irrigation is not required. There will need to be some form of watering because, like somebody else mentioned, without water, these plants will die. So it is up to the designer and the homeowner how they would like to approach it. Yeah, we're open to your suggestions as far as that last comment about promoting landscaping that doesn't require irrigation. We would be open to your suggestions if there's a different plant list that you think would capture that. Oops. Ground squirrels that eat drip irrigation. The first thing that comes to mind is just microplastics, which doesn't have anything to do with what you said. I apologize. That would be a problem. Anything in the chat?
Yeah, there's some good back and forth. So this one might get answered sooner rather than later, but one of them is if homeowners have to give up the front portions of their properties to the city for landscaping and maintain permanent irrigation, isn't that like turning all of Tucson into one big HOA?
I don't. Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
So I was actually just responding to this. I mean, ultimately, the idea, and we're trying to strike the right balance between kind of making sure that there's establishment of those plants. But the idea is to have either irrigation or have flexibility with that, where it's irrigation or other methods, in order to really ensure establishment is made. And that's kind of really the idea there. So it doesn't have to be irrigation, but that is one of the options in order to make sure that it's established so it does grow and live beyond that.
Right. So sorry, do you see any others that still need answering?
So one that was put out that Nick answered but had follow-up. So the original question was, would there be an administrative process to provide relief from the standards for unique circumstances? Nick's answer was yes, there is a process for relief built in here. If vegetation interferes with utilities and abnormal shaped lots, there are ways to landscape elsewhere. And then the follow-up is, what if that becomes cost prohibitive?
I think what's cost prohibitive is subjective for each developer and what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and I think Amanda, I know you have that one slide about like costs. Is that coming up?
Right. Yeah, I covered it before. I know you've been deep
Okay.
into the chat.
Oh,
Thank you for answering
I
all those
thought you talked about
questions.
it. No, that's fine. Yeah,
Yeah.
so Lexi, just kind of related to the cost prohibitive thing. I mean, really, we're again trying to strike a balance, but Amanda was a part of this kind of study group up in Phoenix. They had looked at middle housing and middle housing costs and the increase in flexibility along with the actual middle housing actually decreases costs more than just adding in some landscape standards. So really trying to strike that balance, but in general, it is cheaper. We're trying to offset that with other standards essentially for that, and we're hoping to strike a balance with not requiring too much, but requiring enough to allow for those community benefits, but also make up for the fact that we don't have those commercial standards anymore for 3 and 4 units. So again, finding that balance.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate that. And I'm more interested on the opposite side of it from the value engineering perspective, where landscaping often is the first that gets removed. So making sure there is that flexibility for those circumstances where they truly are the make or break point or what have you, but also ensuring that it's not something you can completely get out of. Thank you.
Yep. Great. Thanks, Lexi. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Lexi. All right, I'm going to end the poll. So you have 5-second warning. So about 50%. Oh,
Could I just ask my one last question before we move off of this completely, even with the votes? I really
please.
would like to hear from the city. What I don't hear is a homeowner choosing to participate in middle housing with the strategies. I think it comes up in this landscaping case as well. The cost for a developer for penciling a project and access to capital could be quite different than a homeowner and their ability to do that. And I do think we want to empower homeowners to potentially build out their properties. Do you have thoughts about that are unique, or is that just naive to imagine there's potential for that if we can find new capital sources?
I might chime in. My name is Sarah, and I'm working on a HUD Pro housing grant that the city recently won, which has funding and plans and activities directly targeting exactly that. How do we get smaller scale developers, those without that financial stack or capital behind them, right? To be able to do these development projects. So working with the Tucson Industrial Development Authority, working with our Housing and Community Development Department, part of this grant is to really try to figure out what are the key pieces that make things difficult for these small scale developers to have these things pencil, and then how can we support through our local financing authorities ways to bolster up that gap, so that we're supporting that. And with it being a process of learning, right? Like we have to kind of start somewhere, and then once we learn that there may be a piece that's harder to do, we want to readdress things in the future. So a lot of it is a learning exercise for the small scale developers and the city in targeting those key issues.
Thank you, Sarah. And the only thing I'll add is that another part of our anticipated next steps after the end of the calendar year is developing a model plan library for middle housing, similarly to what we did with ADUs, which was widely popular, to try to help ease some of that burden of getting started and decision fatigue, and then also make it a little bit cheaper with these pre-approved designs. Thanks, Meredith.
Thank you.
So I'm sharing the results. About 54% of respondents feel our landscaping code is too restrictive and needs additional flexibility. And then an even 15% across all the others, just right, not restrictive enough, and not sure. So thank you so much for your input. Just a little bit more content. I'm going to pass it back over to Nick to cover us until the rest of the way.
All right. Thanks, Amanda. Okay. Yeah, my clicker is a little slow here, so I'm way ahead of it. Just want to make sure I'm on the right slide. Okay. I want to talk about one small change that has to occur because this does not line up with the state definition. So, the city of Tucson is not proposing to change the definition of a group dwelling, which is it's staying the same in our Unified Development Code. However, there's one small standard that applies to some R1 lots that says that if there's more than one dwelling on a lot, all of those dwelling units would be considered one dwelling unit for the purpose of determining what a group dwelling is, if it's a group dwelling or not, essentially. So if you had 4 houses on a lot and 6 people living on them, between all 4 of those houses, it would be considered a group dwelling, which is the same as like a sorority or a fraternity, which does not mesh well with the state's definition, which is a single person living or residing in a dwelling or place of residence, or 2 or more persons living together. So they take it by the unit, so the house, and then this use specific standard that needs to be amended takes it by the entire lot, how many people live on a lot. So we don't have a lot of choice here, but we do need to get rid of that section of it. We're otherwise not making any changes to group dwelling. Accessibility was a subject we heard a lot of when we did our first round of outreach, and we continue to hear about it. So there is a community interest in accessibility standards, and mostly in terms of sidewalks out to the right of way for ADA or just regular or for access to the unit and to the street. So sidewalks from the home are already required to the right of way. And what the city is doing is we're looking at our inclusive home design ordinance to see if we can make that a little bit better, do a little bit better training, and do a little bit better enforcement of making sure that we have access from a right of way, whether it's a sidewalk or the street, to a home. And I do want to just say that historic preservation zones, I think somebody asked this earlier, historic preservation zones and neighborhood preservation zone reviews still apply. So the standards for those are not changing. They're still going to be reviewed in the same exact way they've been reviewed in the city. And there's also no changes to how other zoning overlays are reviewed. So if you're in a restrictive airport overlay, this does not override that. A hillside district or an environmental resource zone, the middle housing does not override that. There are a couple building code changes that we need to address because they're at odds with the state standards. So there are different building codes for different types of residential development right now in the city. So if you were doing 1 or 2 units, a single family or a duplex, you would be using the International Residential Code, and a reviewer would be reviewing for those codes. If you were doing 3 or more units on a project, it would then become commercial, and then you would be using the International Building Code. That needs to change because middle housing can't be required to comply with commercial building codes. This is something the state has made very clear. So something like fire sprinklers are not required anymore. So now developments up to 4 residential units will have the option to use the International Residential Code. 5+ units will use the International Business Code. It really is up to the developer, the homeowner, or the builder, which one they use if you're doing up to 4 units. But that is something that was at odds with the state standards. There's going to be a slight change in our administrative manual to large lot development. So the state bill also said if the gross site area is larger than 10 contiguous acres, then 20% of the lots must allow for middle housing. So when I say larger than 10 contiguous acres, most of the time that means some of these larger subdivisions that you see all around Tucson. So if somebody were to build a flexible lot development subdivision or just a regular subdivision, and it's more than 10 acres contiguously, then they would have to allow for 20% of those lots to allow for middle housing. They don't need to build middle housing on 20% of those lots. They just have to leave it as an allowed building use there. And so that's one of the small changes that we have to make to our administrative manual, and that's just how plans are reviewed with city bodies. So, A couple of things to clean up here. Some future phases. We're exploring applying this citywide. This is something we've continued to hear every meeting. We've heard this. And mayor and council are very aware that we are looking at this geography and that we are going to be monitoring this as we go and look at a citywide product. We are looking at, somebody had a really good question about making this affordable, Meredith, I believe, about finding different ways to make it affordable. And Sarah had a really good answer. And part of that is we would like to look into developing a middle housing model plan library. If you're not familiar with our ADU model plan library, this is essentially some pre-approved drawings and plans that you could purchase for a smaller price. So you can skip some of those administrative costs when it comes to building housing. So we're looking at using some of those pro housing grants that Sarah, I can volunteer Sarah to answer a lot more questions about that than I can. But using some of those grants to kind of look at ways we can do this. And then we're going to continue making adjustments as directed by Mayor and Council and the Planning Commission. So this is a draft, and we're happy to hear all this feedback, and we will be continuing to work on this going forward. Okay. Last Mentimeter, I believe. So any other questions coming in, feel free to send them. Feel free to get in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question as well. A couple things coming in. Let's go citywide. Good job. Don't forget to bring up expanding middle housing plans citywide once you have the first phase showing success. Thanks for all your work. Thank you.
Yeah, similar sentiments in the chat. Some thank yous, some citywide. We'll go ahead and there's a question about properties that are outside but adjacent to the middle housing boundary area. Will they be eligible for middle housing through an administrative review process?
So this is something we discussed internally. So it's something if we did throw around an idea of an opt-in process. I'm not sure how far we're going to get with that, considering that we've proposed this area. This is all something that can change pretty quickly, but it's something that has been discussed. I'm not sure we're going to get there at this point.
Yeah, for future phases, perhaps. So there's a comment in the Mentimeter about lots zoned R1 with existing dwellings. If your lot is meeting the adjusted minimum standards, minimum lot sizes for the new middle housing use, then you would be able to build onto your property a second home or up to 4, depending on, the constraints of your site. This new rule doesn't only apply to vacant properties, it also applies to lots that have existing structures as well, in terms of who's allowed to build middle housing.
Couple other things that came in. When's the soonest this could go into effect realistically? So this will be in effect starting the new year. And then we have unclear what lots zoned R1 with existing dwellings can do. Also parked structures. So R1, if you meet the minimum lot size, you can build middle housing, and that's something that is within the state bill, and you can build middle housing. Regarding parking structures, like a garage, are you referring to a garage here? If so, you can still build a garage. That's definitely within your right, and you're able to build a garage or carports. Something here for keep it small to begin. 76% of the city is R1 or more restrictive. We need more housing all over the city. Please apply this to the entire city.
There's a question in the chat about parks and open space requirements. I can't speak for the Parks Department. I know that they have some methods for evaluating the park need across the city, and it is a metric of the population that's within a 10-minute walk of a park. That's my understanding. And so they periodically revisit that and then look for means of adding new park space. So that is a continually monitored process. Then also through different development fees and such like that is funding for more open spaces.
Yeah, Meredith, I think we'd have to take a look and see how that might work. I think that might be challenging. I mean, I obviously love the idea of figuring out a way to do a set aside for parks and open land, but if there's small part, I don't, we'll definitely think about that and see what we can do. Lexi, timeline to be for revisiting the boundary. So, I mean, we do want to utilize some of the pro housing grant that we're doing in order to kind of expand this boundary. I think we'd want to at least wait until we're starting to see development occur related to this so we can learn from it. So it probably would be a little ways down the road. I'm thinking probably like a year or so, and then we'd probably, utilize that in order to make changes and learn from it, and then look at how we could go potentially citywide. I will say the way we drafted this was with the intention to at some point go citywide. So we believe that the way it's drafted should allow for us to do that relatively easily.
Dan, can I just ask a question? The CCT feels like such an amazing opportunity when it's coupled with middle housing. I've been in Vancouver for the last 5 weeks, and it's 2 blocks back from commercial strips is all kinds of mixtures of incredible density and really nice neighborhoods. And I keep thinking, how do we tie the CCT together with this in a more, like, I love the larger area, but I also think let's make sure that we're choosing those areas as well if they're outside the footprint that you're looking at. I just think it's a huge opportunity that I would love to see us be more aggressive with.
No, thanks, Meredith. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's definitely something we should look at and how that works. Because you're right. I think there is that second level. It was something that we were looking at with the community corridors tool, where we did it with the split zoning, but there's that second level that really it does make a lot of sense as far as having that middle housing there. So that's a great comment, and really appreciate it.
So like Jesse also said, I'd like to see the land split minimum lot size reduction apply to a larger area, if not the whole city. Could this be addressed separately from the middle housing initiative? And that's not something we're proposing at this moment, but kind of to Dan's point, this is something we will continue to look at, and probably once we get a little bit more data about what's happening with middle housing. But thank you for that comment. That's we will definitely record that.
Forrest, I can't really speak too much about. I'm not entirely sure what the current time frame is to approve building permits. We are always looking at ways to make things easier and to speed things up, and continuing to make improvements to our permitting system that hopefully helps with that. So it is something we're looking at. I will say this, that we had mentioned earlier the model plan library for middle housing as well as the one for ADUs. Those are ways as well that we're looking at potentially speeding things up by having pre-approved plans, and allow for people to easily navigate or better navigate the process. And then related to Annalee and question, yes, we will post the video from the meeting, all the slides, we'll have all the materials up on the website for middle housing, which we have the link that Sarah so wonderfully added. Thank you.
Great. So many great questions. Really appreciate everybody here. And we are just about at time. So I want to give you our next steps really quickly. And then I'm always happy to talk to you. If you want to give me a call or send me an email, I'm happy to schedule any sort of call or meeting that you'd like to speak with anything. So public engagement, we're finishing up this month, which is almost over. We're going to continue to revise the proposal based off feedback like this. This is very important for us. Planning Commission, we are going to be attending next month for a review, and then hopefully a public hearing, and then a recommendation from Planning Commission, where that'll take us to Mayor and Council, where we will do a study session and then a public hearing with Mayor and Council, where they will consider what we've put out here as a product. And that leads to someone's question, which was, when is this going to be done? This will be done by January 1st. That's the deadline for adoption. So it's a pretty quick timeline, but everybody here giving us their opinions and helping us work through some of this is really important for us. And so we really do appreciate everybody coming out with all your great comments and questions. And we hope that you all stay engaged with this process, because it's going to go really fast. So like I said, I'm Nick Martell. Feel free to send me an email, and you can continue to post on these chats, and we will definitely record all the responses we've gotten from you all.